It was the biggest martial arts expo of the year, packed with fans, fighters, and media from all over the world. Cameras flashed, microphones jostled for position, and the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Backstage, UFC fighters mingled casually with martial arts legends, sharing stories and laughs, a seemingly normal day in the world of combat sports. Among the crowd, Steven Seagal moved with quiet confidence. His presence was unassuming, almost understated, but those who knew him could feel the weight of experience in every step. Years in martial arts, countless films, real-life combat skills, all wrapped in a calm, almost meditative demeanor. On the other side, a young, brash UFC fighter, known for his knockout power and social media antics, spotted Seagal across the room. He nudged his friend and whispered just loud enough for nearby cameras to catch. "Man, that guy looks old." It wasn't meant to be cruel, just a joke, a passing comment. But in the world of martial arts, words carry weight, especially when spoken about someone like Steven Seagal. Seagal didn't react immediately. He paused, letting the comment hang in the air, his piercing gaze slowly locking onto the fighter. A quiet tension started to ripple through the room. People nearby stopped what they were doing, sensing something unusual, a storm about to erupt in the calmest of seas. The fighter, sensing eyes on him, chuckled nervously. Just kidding," he said, waving his hands in a half-hearted attempt to laugh it off. But the humor fell flat. Cameras were already pointed, capturing the moment. A few journalists whispered to each other, "This is about to get interesting." Seagal's expression remained unreadable, his posture unchanged. But those who looked closely could see the subtle shift in his stance. Feet slightly apart, shoulders relaxed but alert, a tiny narrowing of the eyes. A man with decades of martial arts mastery didn't need to move to make his presence felt, and right now, the room knew it. The UFC fighter, unaware of the silent storm he had just triggered, tried to step closer, thinking the encounter would be harmless banter. But in that instant, the tension thickened, and everyone around sensed a dramatic confrontation brewing. What happened next left everyone speechless and changed the fighter's confidence forever. The young UFC fighter could feel the room shift. One moment, he had been casually joking. The next, the air around Seagal felt heavier, charged with an intensity he had never experienced before. Cameras, which had once been focused on general expo coverage, now zeroed in on them, as if instinctively sensing that something monumental was about to unfold. "Just kidding," the fighter said again, this time a little louder, trying to mask the nervous laugh creeping into his voice. "I didn't mean anything by it." Seagal tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in that quiet, calculating way that spoke volumes. He didn't move a muscle, yet the UFC fighter felt as though a giant invisible weight had settled onto his chest. Around them, whispers began spreading like wildfire. People stopped mid-conversation, pointing cameras and phones toward the scene. "Is that Steven Seagal?" a fan whispered. "Yes, and the fighter just called him old," another replied, stifling a laugh. The UFC fighter's bravado started to falter. He had faced world-class fighters, endured brutal octagon battles, and stared down opponents twice his size. But this was something different. The calm confidence radiating from Seagal was unlike anything he had felt before. Trying to regain control, the fighter stepped slightly closer, hands raised in a friendly, no offense gesture. "Hey, I respect your work, man, seriously. I was just joking, you're a legend." Seagal didn't immediately respond. He simply watched, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his lips, like a predator humoring its prey. The tension escalated further as the fighter realized the cameras weren't just filming anymore. This moment was being captured from every angle, destined to go viral. The crowd around them started murmuring, sensing the shift in power dynamics. Some fans whispered encouragement to the fighter. "It's okay, man. Keep smiling." Others, however, leaned toward Seagal, whispering things like, "Don't underestimate him. He's still deadly." The UFC fighter tried another joke, nervously chuckling. "You know, maybe I should have said, young at heart." "Yeah, that's it. You're young at heart." Seagal finally spoke, a calm, measured voice that cut through the murmurs like a blade. "You should be careful with your words," he said slowly. "Respect isn't given, it's earned. And underestimating someone based on age can be dangerous." A hush fell over the crowd. The fighter's smile faltered. The casual bravado that had carried him through countless interviews and weigh-ins seemed to vanish in an instant. He swallowed hard, realizing that the situation had escalated far beyond a simple joke. Around them, cameras zoomed in as fans began recording. The tension was palpable. Every movement, every glance between the two men was magnified by the growing crowd. The UFC fighter's friends and handlers began to inch closer, sensing that what had started as harmless teasing was now teetering on the edge of humiliation. The fighter attempted to laugh again, but it came out strained, forced. I meant no disrespect," he stammered. "I'm a big fan, seriously." Seagal's eyes softened, but his voice remained authoritative. "Words carry weight, especially when spoken publicly. Don't assume your fame or skill can shield you from the consequences of underestimating someone." The UFC fighter's heart raced. He could feel the spotlight of cameras, the whispers of the crowd, and the intensity of Seagal's gaze pressing down on him all at once. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely small, not physically, but mentally and emotionally. Fans nearby leaned into their phones. One whispered into the microphone, "This is unreal. The fighter looks terrified. Seagal hasn't even moved." The fighter finally stepped back, holding up his hands in surrender. Okay, I get it. You're amazing. No more jokes, I promise." Seagal nodded subtly, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. The lesson had been delivered without a single aggressive move, but the impact was undeniable. Have you ever underestimated someone based on age or experience? And right now, which country and city are you watching from? Comment below. We want to know your story. Even as the fighter struggled to regain composure, the crowd buzzed. People whispered about Seagal's calm dominance, his ability to command respect without throwing a punch, and the humility and panic of the young UFC fighter. Phones continued to roll. This moment was already shaping up to go viral. In that charged atmosphere, one thing became clear. The UFC fighter had made a grave miscalculation. What had seemed like a harmless joke had set in motion a lesson in respect, power, and the dangers of underestimating someone with years of mastery. And everyone watching, fans, journalists, and social media followers alike, could sense that the story was only just beginning. The young UFC fighter's laughter had long since vanished. What started as a harmless joke now felt like walking on thin ice over an endless abyss. Seagal's presence had shifted the energy in the room, quiet, unwavering, and commanding respect without uttering a single threatening word. The crowd around them had grown. Fans, journalists, and fellow fighters sensed something unusual. This was no ordinary celebrity encounter. Phones were raised, cameras zooming, as people whispered among themselves, speculating what would happen next. Every movement, every glance, felt magnified. The fighter tried to regain composure. "I really didn't mean anything," he said, forcing a half-smile. "I respect your career, seriously." Seagal tilted his head slightly, letting the comment linger before speaking. "Respect is not something you claim with words. It is earned through humility, skill, and awareness. And some lessons are better learned before they cost you dearly." A collective murmur ran through the crowd. The UFC fighter could feel eyes on him, analyzing every twitch, every nervous gesture. His confidence, built over years of fights, media appearances, and thousands of fans, was crumbling under Seagal's quiet authority. Trying to lighten the mood, the fighter attempted another joke. "I mean, you look Younger than I thought for your age. Yeah, that's what I meant. The words hung awkwardly in the air. Seagal didn't smile. He didn't move. He simply shifted his weight, one foot slightly forward, a subtle stance that conveyed readiness and power without aggression. The UFC fighter's stomach sank. He could sense that he had crossed a line he didn't fully understand until now. Fans whispered excitedly. Is Seagal about to show something? Another. I can't believe the fighter actually called him old. The fighter's friends and handlers in the background started inching closer, worry evident on their faces. Maybe back off, one muttered under his breath. But it was too late. The moment had already taken on a life of its own. Seagal finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. Words are weapons when used carelessly. Judging someone by appearances, by age, or by fame is dangerous. True strength is measured by control, awareness, and respect. The UFC fighter's mouth went dry. Every ounce of bravado he relied on in the octagon seemed irrelevant here. He had faced knockout power, relentless strikes, and experienced the roar of thousands of fans. Yet in front of Seagal, he felt completely exposed. The crowd was silent now, all eyes fixed. Phones rolled. People whispered excitedly. He's not moving, he's just standing there. And the fighter, he looks terrified. Realizing that the encounter had spiraled far beyond a simple joke, the UFC fighter tried to backpedal. Okay, I get it. No disrespect. I was wrong, he said, raising his hands in surrender. Seagal's gaze softened slightly, but his presence still radiated power. Acknowledging your mistake is the first step, he said. The second is learning not to repeat it. The young fighter's mind raced. This was not about winning a fight or a championship. This was about humility, awareness, and understanding that respect could not be earned through fame alone. The crowd, sensing the tension break slightly, began whispering excitedly among themselves. Phones continued to roll, capturing every subtle movement, every word. Social media was already primed to explode with the footage of this encounter. Even as the fighter tried to regain his composure, a lingering awareness remained. This was a lesson he would not forget. Every time he looked at Seagal, he felt a mixture of awe, embarrassment, and respect. The realization hit him hard. The man he had casually mocked was a living embodiment of discipline, skill, and mastery. And everyone watching, fans, fighters, journalists, and social media followers, could feel the gravity of the moment. The UFC fighter's confidence had been shaken, humility had been demanded, and the story was only beginning. The whispers in the room grew louder. This is unbelievable. The fighter just learned the hard way. Seagal didn't even have to throw a punch. The stage was set. The lesson had begun, and the UFC fighter now faced a choice. Continue trying to save face, or truly acknowledge the humbling reality staring him in the eyes. The tension lingered like an electric current in the air, as everyone realized that the next move, from either side, could make this encounter unforgettable. The tension in the room had reached a level that made even the air feel thick. Phones were raised, cameras zooming, and every whisper in the crowd carried the weight of expectation. The young UFC fighter had gone from casual bravado to visible discomfort, realizing with every passing second that he had underestimated the calm, composed man before him. Seagal remained still, his eyes locked onto the fighter, radiating confidence without any overt movement. Then, almost imperceptibly, he shifted his stance, one foot forward, shoulders squared, hands relaxed but ready. It wasn't an aggressive pose. It was a subtle reminder of his mastery. The fighter, noticing the small movement, instinctively stepped back. A bead of sweat traced his temple. He had faced the toughest opponents in the octagon, but something about Seagal's quiet precision made him feel exposed. Seagal slowly lifted his hand, not toward the fighter, but to demonstrate a simple wrist lock, a fundamental martial arts move executed with perfect form. The crowd gasped, some leaning forward in astonishment. Phones rolled as fans tried to capture every detail. The UFC fighter's eyes widened. "Wait, did he just—" he muttered under his breath. "Yes," whispered a bystander. "He's showing skill without even touching you." "That's Seagal." Seagal's movements were deliberate but effortless. Every gesture conveyed decades of experience. The fighter, realizing the subtle lesson, froze. It wasn't about strength or power. It was about control, awareness, and the ability to command respect silently. Around them, whispers grew louder. People started pointing. "Look at that. He's still deadly. Even without throwing a punch, he's intimidating." The UFC fighter's friends shifted nervously. "Maybe step back," one suggested softly, but he was already rooted to the spot. His earlier jokes, the comments about age, they now seemed foolish and naive. Seagal, noticing the realization settling in, spoke calmly. "You see, strength is more than muscle. Experience, control, and awareness are equally important. Never mistake age for weakness or arrogance for confidence." The fighter's mouth went dry. He nodded slowly, too stunned to speak. For the first time, he truly understood the depth of the man standing before him. The casual insult, meant to be humorous, had led to a humbling confrontation he would never forget. The crowd, sensing the UFC fighter's discomfort, began murmuring excitedly. Fans whispered, "He's frozen. He didn't even try to fight back." Another added, "This is going to go viral for sure." Seagal didn't even need to throw a punch. Even the fighter could feel it, the power of quiet mastery, the aura of discipline and control that made Seagal legendary. He shifted uncomfortably, realizing that he had been caught in a lesson far bigger than himself. Seagal took one more deliberate step forward, just close enough to make his presence tangible, and demonstrated another subtle technique, a balanced disruption move. The fighter stumbled slightly backward, more from surprise than contact. The audience gasped audibly, some clapping in appreciation. The UFC fighter finally raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, his voice trembling slightly. Okay, I get it. You're amazing. I was wrong." Seagal's eyes softened slightly, his calm smile just visible. "Acknowledging your mistake is the first step," he said. "The second is learning from it." White medium star engagement break. Did you see that coming? If you're shocked by Seagal's skill, type "wow" in the comments. And tell us where you're watching from, which country or city. The crowd erupted in whispers and soft applause, many recording the moment on their phones. It was no longer just a confrontation. It was a lesson in respect, mastery, and humility. The UFC fighter, humbled and visibly shaken, took a deep breath. For the first time, he truly understood the meaning of respect in martial arts, and the consequences of underestimating someone based solely on appearances or age. Around them, fans and journalists continued capturing the moment. Social media feeds were already lighting up. Everyone knew this encounter would be shared worldwide, a viral lesson in humility that no one would forget. The tension in the room eased slightly, but the UFC fighter's regret was palpable. He had been called out without Seagal ever raising a hand, his lesson delivered through precision, poise, and the quiet authority of a true master. And as phones continued recording, the young fighter realized that this moment would haunt him, but also teach him a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. The UFC fighter's confidence had completely evaporated. What had begun as a light-hearted joke had spiraled into a public lesson he could not escape. Phones continued to roll, capturing every tremor in his hands, every nervous glance toward Seagal. The young fighter, who once dominated headlines for his knockout power, now found himself powerless, not physically, but mentally and emotionally. Seagal remained calm, his presence unwavering. He didn't need to raise his voice or move aggressively. The sheer mastery in his posture, the deliberate precision of his movements, and the quiet authority in his gaze had stripped the fighter of his bravado. "Do you understand now?" Seagal's voice was calm but sharp, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd like a blade. Strength is not just about what you can hit or how fast you can move. It is about control, awareness, and respect. You cannot intimidate someone with words alone if they have lived their craft with integrity. The fighter swallowed hard, nodding quickly. His mouth opened, then closed. He had no words to defend himself. Every attempt at humor, every playful jab about age, now felt foolish and reckless. He could feel the eyes of the audience, fans, journalists, and fellow fighters, all silently judging him, recognizing his mistake. Around them, whispers erupted. He's actually speechless. Seagal didn't even touch him, and he looks terrified. Trying to salvage what little dignity he had left, the fighter laughed nervously. I really didn't mean it. I respect you. Big fan, seriously, he said, his voice shaky. Seagal's eyes softened just a fraction, though his voice remained firm. Admiration without understanding is meaningless. You cannot claim respect unless you earn it, and that begins with humility. Words carry consequences, whether you are joking or serious. The crowd leaned in, sensing that this was not just a personal lesson. It was a demonstration of how true mastery commands respect. Phones captured every nuance, and social media users would later comment that Seagal didn't have to lift a finger to humble the young fighter. The UFC fighter's handlers in the background exchanged worried glances. They had never seen him so rattled outside the octagon. He had faced world champions and fearsome opponents. Yet here, in front of Seagal, he looked small, embarrassed, and completely out of his element. The fighter finally raised both hands in surrender, his head slightly bowed. Okay, I get it. I was wrong. Truly wrong, he admitted. His tone was quiet, almost reverent. Seagal nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. Acknowledging your mistake is one thing. Learning from it is another. Humility is the foundation of mastery. Never underestimate someone based on appearances, and never assume your position gives you immunity from respect. The crowd erupted into applause, soft at first, then growing louder. Fans were cheering not just for Seagal's skill, but for the grace with which he had delivered the lesson. The young fighter, still flushed with embarrassment, realized that he had been taught a truth that no social media clapback or media headline could convey. A few journalists whispered into their microphones, "This is going viral, a lesson in humility, captured perfectly on camera." Seagal finally stepped back slightly, allowing the fighter some space, but his presence still dominated the room. The young UFC fighter exhaled slowly, the adrenaline still coursing through him. He understood that the viral footage wouldn't just be shared because of the encounter. It would be remembered as a story of respect, authority, and humbling power. The fighter's eyes met Seagal's once more, and he nodded in acknowledgement. "I won't make that mistake again," he said, quietly but sincerely. Seagal's calm gaze softened into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Good. Learn from it. Respect is more valuable than fame. Humility is the true mark of strength. Have you ever been humbled like this? Comment yes if you have, or a no if not. Would you have dared to joke about someone like Seagal?" The crowd continued to murmur in awe. Phones captured the moment from every angle, recording the fighter's embarrassment, Seagal's calm authority, and the undeniable lesson that had been delivered without violence, yet with absolute clarity. In that charged atmosphere, one thing was clear. The young UFC fighter had learned the hard way that skill, experience, and mastery can never be judged by age or appearance. And the audience, both in the room and across the world, would witness and remember this unforgettable encounter. Even as the crowd began to disperse, whispers continued to circulate. He didn't even fight him, and he humbled the fighter completely. That's how you command respect without violence. The stage was now set for the next moment. Seagal's final display of skill and the public revelation of just how much power and mastery he still commanded. The room had grown electric with anticipation. Every phone was pointed at them. Every whisper carried the weight of expectation. The UFC fighter, still visibly shaken, had retreated slightly, his bravado replaced by a mixture of awe and embarrassment. Seagal remained calm, his posture relaxed but undeniably authoritative. The earlier demonstrations of skill had stunned the fighter, but Seagal wasn't finished. This would be the final lesson, one that no one present would ever forget. Without a word, Seagal shifted his weight subtly, his movements fluid and deliberate. He moved closer, just enough to make his presence felt, and demonstrated a series of rapid, precise strikes in the air, no contact, just technique. Each motion was executed perfectly, a combination of balance, speed, and control that left the audience breathless. The UFC fighter's eyes widened. He had fought the fastest, strongest opponents in the octagon, yet watching Seagal's skill unfold, he realized just how much mastery transcended raw power. This wasn't about age. It was about decades of disciplined training, awareness, and the art of anticipation. Fans gasped audibly. "Did you see that?" someone whispered. "He didn't even touch him." Seagal then executed a subtle foot sweep, stopping just short of the fighter's legs. The fighter stumbled slightly, more from shock than impact. The demonstration was precise, calculated, a clear display of control without harm. "Respect is earned," Seagal said calmly, his voice cutting through the astonished murmurs. "Not through words, not through bravado, not through reputation. True mastery is quiet, patient, and deliberate. Those who underestimate others based on appearances are the ones who pay the price." The UFC fighter's face had gone pale. He swallowed hard, nodding repeatedly. For the first time, he fully understood the magnitude of his mistake. The casual joke, meant to provoke laughter, had triggered a humbling encounter that showcased the difference between raw talent and true mastery. The crowd erupted into applause. Phones captured every angle, streaming live to social media. Comments flew across feeds. "Seagal is a living legend. This is the most humiliating lesson I've ever seen." Even the UFC fighter looks terrified. One journalist whispered into her mic, "This will go viral, not because of a fight, but because of a lesson in respect and humility." The UFC fighter finally stepped forward, hands raised slightly in acknowledgement. I can't believe I underestimated you," he said, his voice sincere. I've learned my lesson." Seagal nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "Good. Let this moment teach you, and everyone watching, that respect is the foundation of skill. Never judge someone by age, appearance, or reputation. Always recognize mastery when you see it." The crowd cheered louder, some clapping, others whistling. The fighter's handlers breathed a sigh of relief, and fans continued recording every moment. Social media was already buzzing. Clips of Seagal's demonstration were being shared worldwide, with captions praising his skill, composure, and the humility with which he had handled the situation. Even as the UFC fighter's embarrassment remained, he began to smile slightly, acknowledging the lesson. I won't make that mistake again," he admitted quietly. Seagal's eyes met his. "Good. Humility and respect matter more than fame, strength, or bravado. Remember this moment." Would you have dared to joke about Seagal? Comment yes if you would, or no if not. And don't forget, which country and city are you watching this from? The crowd continued to buzz with awe and excitement. This was not just a viral clip in the making. It was a story about respect, discipline, and the humbling power of experience. Everyone present, from fans to journalists, knew they had witnessed something rare, a lesson delivered without violence, yet unforgettable in its impact. As phones continued rolling, the UFC fighter finally lowered his head, taking a deep breath. He realized that his public lesson had been delivered perfectly, a combination of embarrassment, awe, and respect. And the lesson would not only follow him through his career, but also inspire millions watching online. The expo, once buzzing with casual chatter, had transformed into a scene of viral history. Seagal had demonstrated that mastery and humility, paired with patience and skill, were far more powerful than any punch, kick, or insult. And as the crowd slowly dispersed, the world knew one undeniable truth. The young UFC fighter had been humbled, and Steven Seagal had reminded everyone, including millions online, why true respect can never be underestimated. By the time the expo ended, the story had already taken on a life of its own. Phones had captured every nuance. The UFC fighter's nervous jokes, Seagal's calm but commanding presence, the subtle demonstrations of skill, and the ultimate lesson in humility. Clips were already circulating on social media, racking up millions of views within hours. Fans from around the globe commented in real time. Some laughed at the fighter's embarrassment, others marveled at Seagal's effortless authority. The hashtags #RespectSeagal and #HumblingLesson began trending across platforms. Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok were flooded with posts, reactions, and even memes capturing the moment the UFC fighter realized just how miscalculated his joke had been. Even mainstream media caught wind of the viral story. Headlines appeared. UFC fighter publicly humiliated by Steven Seagal. Instantly regrets his words. Legendary martial artist teaches humility without throwing a punch. For the young fighter, the experience was more than viral fame. It was a profound lesson. He had faced the best in the octagon and survived countless brutal battles. Yet here, in a crowded expo hall, he had been humbled in front of fans, media, and peers. The realization was humbling. Skill, experience, and mastery cannot be mocked or underestimated. Later, in a quiet backstage interview, he admitted, "I thought I could make a joke and it would be funny. I had no idea. Seagal didn't even touch me, and I felt like the smallest person in the room. I've learned my lesson. Respect is earned, not assumed." Seagal, on the other hand, maintained his calm composure. He didn't gloat or mock the fighter. He had delivered his lesson with subtlety, grace, and undeniable authority. Social media users praised him not only for his skill, but for the manner in which he handled the situation, a demonstration of respect, patience, and humility. Fans across the world chimed in. Seagal's calmness speaks louder than any punch. This is why respect matters more than fame or youth. Even the UFC fighter learned the hard way. Brilliant lesson. The video clips continued to spread rapidly. Analysts dissected Seagal's moves. Martial arts enthusiasts highlighted his technique, and casual fans marveled at how effortlessly a legend could command respect without aggression. Across platforms, millions were inspired, discussing not just martial arts, but the larger lesson: never judge someone by appearance or underestimate their abilities. Meanwhile, the UFC fighter's reflection became a teachable moment. He posted a short video online. "I want to apologize to anyone I disrespected. I made a mistake, and I've learned an important lesson. Humility, skill, and respect go hand in hand. Thank you, Steven Seagal, for showing me, and the world, how it's done." The viral reaction wasn't just about embarrassment or spectacle. It was about a story everyone could relate to. Audiences everywhere understood the universal truth. Arrogance and assumptions have consequences, and true mastery is often silent but powerful. By the end of the day, millions had watched the encounter, shared the clips, and discussed the moral online. The story became an enduring reminder. Respect is not optional. It is earned through experience, humility, and discipline. If you believe no one should be underestimated or judged by appearance, type respect in the comments. Share this story with friends and subscribe for more jaw-dropping lessons like this. Even after the lights dimmed at the expo, the impact lingered. The young UFC fighter had been humbled, the crowd inspired, and the world reminded of a timeless truth. True power lies not in words or fame, but in skill, patience, and the ability to command respect through presence alone. And for those watching, The lesson was unforgettable. Underestimate no one, because the quietest person in the room may be the one who teaches the loudest lesson of all.